say something like, it's part of like, I would be like, oh, but like before we got married or whatever, or even like right after we got married, we were talking about things and I would be like, but we can't do this or this because this is how it is. And Derick, coming from the outside, he'd be like, and this is normal. And I was like,
right.
yeah, wait, like, yeah. So stuff that like it seemed somewhat normal to me. And then I was like, oh, like,
right.
Hey friends, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Jana Duggar and Derick Dillard sat down for a new interview with Kate Casey from Reality Life. Kate let me know last week that the interview was coming, so I made sure to stop by on her podcast to take a listen. In the interview, Jill and Derick were a lot more candid than they've been in some other interviews, simply because I think they just had more time. The interview is about 50 minutes long, and that's pretty lengthy for them. If you haven't listened to Kate's podcast, she does a really good job. She covers all different topics within the reality TV genre, and she actually interviewed the producers from Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets, and while some media has shied away from asking some of the tougher questions related to Jill's upbringing, Kate actually, in a rapid fire session, brought up the practice that Jill grew up with called blanket training. Now, Jill said that she does not practice this, and in many ways denounced the practice that her mom made very popular in her book that she wrote, 20 Duggars and Counting. Now, if you haven't read Jill and Derick's book, there's another tidbit in the book that I wanted to share as well. And that was that back in, I think, 2020, 2021, Jill posted a photograph on her Instagram of her drinking a pina colada. Jill and Derick do have alcohol from time to time, and she, having made the decision to sort of break free from a lot of the rules that she grew up under, the IBLP, posted the photo on her Instagram. And that photo actually prompted her dad to recommend Rehab. So let's dive into the topic. Before we do, can you please do me a favor and give this video a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel if you have not yet subscribed, and click on that notification bell. So we'll start out with the clip. We'll start out with her book entry about going to rehab, and then, well, not really rehab, but you know what I'm saying. Jim Bob wanting to send them to rehab. And then we're going to dive into the clip from Kate's podcast, which I don't want to give away the whole podcast. So I'll give you that clip. And then if you want to watch the full podcast or listen to the full podcast, I'll be linking that in my description box below. So she wrote about this in her book, and this is what she said. In the book, she talks about how as she sort of moved away from a lot of the IBLP's teaching and the fear base that she grew up in, she enrolled her son into public school, and she also started wearing pants as well as taking her first drink. But in a photograph, she didn't move the drink out of the photo, and this is what she wrote. I guess that's why I didn't move the pina colada out of the shot when Derick took a photo of us at the end of the meal. I was going to. When he reached for his phone, I reached out my hand to move the half empty glass, but then I stopped. Derick had drunk a beer, and I had my cocktail. It was a special kid-free date time, just the two of us. So I left it there. It was on the table, in the shot, there for everyone to see when I posted the photo later on. I didn't want to be fake. I wanted to be real. The whole pina colada picture got some people upset. The story, such as it was, got picked up by People magazine and others. But it wasn't anything like the nose ring or the time I started wearing pants. It must have triggered one of Pop's Google alerts, but there was no communication from him. I guess he had gotten the hint a few months earlier when he read online that Derick had been drinking a beer. Pops had made contact after and offered to send Derick to the same rehab facility Josh had been to in the hope of curing Derick's clearly raging alcoholism. Since he'd never been drunk or even had more than 2 beers in one sitting, Derick declined. Can you imagine? You grow up in fundamentalism, your family isn't into drinking, and they believe that drinking is sinful. And while you are just being an adult, adulting, having a cocktail, your dad finds out that your husband had a beer, and he calls your husband and says, "I'd like to send you to Reformers Unanimous." This is the place that they sent Josh when he got caught cheating on Anna. So Reformers Unanimous is actually the program that's run out of churches. North Love in Illinois is where it originated. And the rehab is faith-based. It's basically you pray and write in a Bible, and that's supposed to cure your addiction. This facility not only treats substance abuse, but it claims that there's addictions to adult content, which is not a recognized addiction by the psychological community and not a recognized addiction for insurance purposes. So I'm not sure how they would bill insurance or if it's you have to pay as you go, but Josh went there for months. And if you recall, I had spoken to someone that worked there who was privy to what Josh was going through at the time. And they had said that Josh was very arrogant. Josh did the bare minimum. Josh was not remorseful. So the idea that, since Reformers Unanimous worked so well for, Josh, that Jim Bob would want to send Derick there. It's funny, but it's sad because obviously Jim Bob has such ignorant beliefs. And the irony here is that Derick had 1 or 2 beers and he wants him to go to rehab, right? But Josh Duggar, who's done really, 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 really horrible things, instead of getting him psychological help, he sends him to a rehab for substance abuse, which he didn't have. Go figure. Now, in the interview, Kate and Jill and Derick talked about her growing up with these strict rules of the IBLP. Interestingly, she discussed, while drinking obviously was a big issue for them when she started drinking, it was her wearing pants and a nose ring that really bothered her dad the most. And in the podcast, she shared that her dad was upset that she was allowing worldly influences into her life because she basically raised her siblings, and then her siblings were looking at Jill as a mom. And so they were seeing their mom wear pants and have a nose ring. Imagine that's the life you live. Like, Jill has little sisters that look at her as a mom because she was forced to raise her siblings. They had all these kids and they didn't raise them. And so when he was talking to them, according to Derick, he was effectively saying that Jim Bob was telling her, like, you're like a mom to them and you are making them, you're influencing them, which is ridiculous because it's their job to manage their children. And wearing pants and a nose ring is somehow more dangerous to them than, what Josh did. Anyways, later in the interview, they started talking about blanket time or blanket training. Michelle calls this blanket training in her book. And long story short, what blanket training is you place the blanket on the floor and you place the baby on the blanket. The baby is not supposed to move off the blanket in order to ensure that the child stays on the blanket. When the child moves off the blanket, you are supposed to smack the child. And you would use a rod. And Michelle implemented this in her home, and she told all of her friends about it. She even allegedly gave out rods of encouragement to her friends for baby showers. So you have a lot of people that have been influenced by Michelle Duggar. And so Kate brought it up and she called it blanket therapy. Check it out.
The blanket therapy. Did you, when you were raising your kids, when they were really little, did you look at each other like, I cannot believe that they had this crazy way of raising like babies within the Bill Gothard, realm?
Oh yeah. I do remember seeing that. We don't do it with our kids, but yeah, there are a lot of things I was kind of like, this is like
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think I heard it mostly. It was interesting. I heard it mostly from other people looking in, because even sometimes, and when I think we talk about this in our book, where I might say something like, it's part of like, I would be like, oh, but like before we got married or whatever, or even right after we got married, we were talking about things, and I would be like, but we can't do this or this because this is how it is. And Derick, coming from the outside, he'd be like, and this is normal. And I was like,
right.
Yeah. Wait, like, yeah. So stuff that like it seemed somewhat normal to me. And then I was like, oh, like,
right.
Yeah, I hear from other people, like you're asking me now, like, is this normal? And I was like, oh, like,
right.
He would ask me stuff like that.
Yeah.
In a world of Bill Gothard and fundamentalism, blanket training was and continues to be a popular parenting strategy, because apparently having a playpen and allowing children to be children is unacceptable. And in that world, it's just normal for parents to do this to their kids. And as you're hearing Jill say, is one, they don't do that. And two, she did see it in her life, and she didn't realize that it was abnormal. She didn't realize that there were other methods and ways to manage children until someone outside of her bubble revealed to her that this isn't normal and this isn't helpful, and maybe we shouldn't do this to our children. It's not a thought or a consideration. And that's how sheltered they are. This is something her mom made extremely popular. So it's good to hear her say that she does not practice this. It's hard to know which Duggar daughters do practice this, because those that remain in fundamentalism would never admit to it anyway. So there's been a lot of rumors, and people would speculate years ago that Jill was doing this. So it's good to hear that she's not, and that she had to learn by leaving that it wasn't normal. And that could very well be why her book doesn't address the corporal punishment that is super standard in the IBLP, and that was part of their lives. She may have not really grappled with the idea that, wait a minute, this isn't normal. People don't generally do this. You can do other ways of parenting. Some children have been ingrained from birth to believe that their parents love them, and that's why they're doing it. And that the parents are brainwashed to believe that if they don't discipline their children in this way, that they're not loving them, because they believe that God commands it. Jill's come a long way. She is continuing to unpack and unravel. The interview, I think, is phenomenal. And she even talks about how she wants her kids to go to college. She doesn't want to take away any opportunities for them, and that in the IBLP, they don't push college. Another thing that Kate asked about had to do with Jana and how long Jana was in Chicago. Was Jana a Gothard Girl? Like, how many times did she go to headquarters? And Jill revealed that Jana went a lot. She went for months, sometimes for weeks. She was constantly going to headquarters to help, and Gothard apparently really liked Jana. So Jill talked pretty extensively, very openly, candidly, and I think her interviews are a lot more revealing than other Duggar family members, and she's still incredibly sympathetic and understanding to her siblings, and doesn't expect them to see her worldview, and just is trying to live her own life. And finally, she did mention, or Derick mentioned, that some of the Duggar siblings that still live at home don't even know that they can't move out because they've been told their whole lives that if they move out, it's wicked and sinful. So think about that. Jason Duggar recently posed shirtless on Instagram. Yeah, great step for Jason, but he still lives at home. So one step forward, two steps back. Tell me what your thoughts are about all of this. Were you surprised to hear Jill sort of denounce blanket training? And what are your thoughts about Derick going to rehab because Jim Bob thinks he needs treatment? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Bye, guys.